I'm 33 years old. I have my entire life ahead of me to figure that out. But if
Yeah.
I had not taken a step back and understood the root cause of my burnout and just kind of developed this self-awareness that I now have, I have no doubt that I would have continued to chase various things and
Mm.
and just continue to be chronically unhappy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Schaefer, your host of Talks with Dr. Schaefer. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, and publisher, and I'm passionate about using storytelling as a tool to help you reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future. And today, I'm excited to be joined by another physician, Dr. Shehzad. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was going to say Dr. Schaefer. And today I'm excited to be joined by another physician, Dr. Shehzad Batliwala. Dr. Shehzad is an ophthalmologist, an entrepreneur, a speaker, and he has a wonderful story of resilience and growth that he would like to share with us today. And we're so excited to have him here and share his story with you. Dr. Shehzad, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about the path that you have been going on with regards to your career in recent years, because I understand it's not necessarily a straight line as most good stories are, right? They are going here and there and finding really where you want to go and where you want to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we cut out earlier, but thanks so much for having me. This is truly an honor. I appreciate the invite. So, yeah, I mean, I never really uh, thought that this is how my life was going to go, at all. Um, so I'm an ophthalmologist, and I was just always like, gung ho, highly driven, highly ambitious, and you know, um, didn't even think twice about like, I mean, it was always going to be medicine, right? Medicine or nothing else. It was always going to be medicine. And then when I finished my medical training, I just felt this like, I think people have described it as kind of like the arrival fallacy, right? Like I'm here. I went through this really difficult journey of, college and medical school and residency and fellowship and all this stuff. And I still felt very unhappy and unfulfilled, right? And I was just asking myself, like what more is there? Like this cannot possibly be it. Um,
Mm.
and when you're so driven to always just accomplish things and achieve things, because that becomes a measure, right, by which you measure your self-worth,
Mm.
then when you don't have anything else to achieve, or at least in the traditional sense, right? Because we have the whole path laid out for us. Like, here's what you got to do next. You got to take the MCAT. You got to take the boards. You got to do this. And so there was really no clearly defined path for me afterwards. And I just felt like I
Mm.
was just kind of left alone to fend for myself. Um, I just didn't sit well with me. And I think, you know, there were also really difficult things going on all throughout my training, whether it was family related things or finances or what have you. So, my family's immigration issues, like there were a lot of things always constantly going on with my training, like kind of in parallel. And so I think all of those really complex emotions just kind of burned me out, right? I
Mm.
never ever thought that burnout would be something that I would experience, honestly. I
Mm.
was like a very cocky, egotistical kind of guy. I was like, burnout, like that's not for me, That's for
Mm.
people who are weak or whatever, right?
Mm.
But that was a very immature line of thinking because anyone can be afflicted with burnout, you know? You only have so much to give, and if you're not really taking care of yourself, you're gonna hit a wall. That's what happened to me. So that was 2021, 2022. So not that long ago, right? So I took a huge step back. I was working in medicine about, 2 days a week. And I just took some time to really understand the root cause of my unhappiness. Why was I so unhappy? And what is it going to take to really shift my mindset around? And that's where I got into um, coaching. I started putting people around me who um, could really serve as an objective mirror, right? And really tell me the truth in terms of like, where my thinking might be flawed and where I could think differently, and things like that. Um, and all of that really, really helped because I just got a lot of clarity in terms of who I am, what it is that I want in my life truly, right? What are my values? Like, how can I live my life in alignment with my own values? I never even knew what values were. Right? I remember when I first got
Mm,
into coaching and we started doing values work, I was like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, like fun, I like having fun. Like, but that's
mm,
it's so much deeper than that. And I think that's the
mhm,
biggest point. As um, physicians, we commit to this life of medicine so early on, right? Before our frontal lobe is like even fully developed. And I
right.
don't think we really take the, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I never took the time to understand myself before committing myself to this really, really arduous journey, you know?
Mm,
And so I think sooner or later, everyone kind of needs uh, a reality check to really, get them to like turn inwards and figure out what it is
mhm.
that um uh they're all about. So anyway, that's kind of an overview of my recent journey.
You have given a really interesting talk, and I would encourage listeners to Google it with regards to self awareness that you are giving to students. That was really, really intriguing. And what you were just saying now really reminds me of that theme. And I think also of the understanding of motivation, right? So when you said, medicine, it was always going to be medicine for me from the start. That's what it was going to be. The question in my mind was, why was it always going to be medicine? Right? What was the motivator there? What was the inspiration there? Do you remember? Can you put yourself in your shoes of teenage Shehzad and think why you decided medicine or bust?
Yeah, a lot of it was coming from this like survival mindset of, you know, I grew up in very difficult circumstances financially speaking, and um, in my household, it was always just kind of expected that I was going to do something that was going to make my parents proud, right?
Mm,
Um, that so I think those were the two main reasons is finances because hey, doctors do well. I'm really good at taking tests. And so I'm going to commit myself to this journey because like if, something happens and I have to show up for my family and protect them, at least I'll have the means to do so, right?
mm,
That was really the very like simplistic thinking back then, that was really one of the main motivations. And the other thing was, like I said, that, I wanted to do something to make my parents proud, right? I just kind of
mm,
and I was never like told that point blank, right? That, you know, we want you to become a doctor or like you got to make us proud or anything like that. It was just kind of subliminal messaging. Like it was just always kind of, understood, right? And
mm,
so I was like, okay, well, I got to do something that, you know, at least externally, outwardly paints the picture of success
mm,
so that my parents can be proud. And, when they go and tell their friends and family members, like our son is a doctor, like that'll make them feel good, and I will have played a role in that. And so it was very like kind of like just sacrificial type of thinking, right? It's just like, oh, I'm just gonna, you know, it, like commit to this 15, 20 year journey because I want to make my parents proud. And because I am afraid that financially we won't have enough. And
Mm.
right then and there, right? There's nothing that I said that tells you that there's anything internal, intrinsically about like wanting to become a doctor. Now there
Mhm.
was a little bit of that, right?
Mhm.
My mom has mental illness, and I grew up like taking care of her. And when I was like 13 or 14, she was diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia, and I just remember like being really fascinated by the human mind, right? What happens, right, inside this structure between our earlobes that just completely changes our reality. I was just very, very fascinated with like neurotransmitters and neurochemistry. I remember like reading a lot about Einstein and the fact that he would like visualize these crazy experiments with light right in his head, as part of his process to come up with like the theories of relativity and things like that. So I was just always fascinated by the mind. So
Mhm.
there was that um, kind of pure, naive, like joy, right, and fascination with the human body and the human mind. But I think that I, you know, I focused so much the um uh on the more disempowering narrative of why I chose medicine. Like that's what I focused on. And as I went through my training, the money difficulties just kind of compounded, right? Things were always really tight in when it comes to finances. Um, the validation seeking reasons, like all of those disempowering reasons, that's the story that I created in my head, you know? And I'm convinced that that is part of what led to my burnout. It's the
Mm.
stories that we tell ourselves, right? We are only the stories we tell ourselves. And what I've learned since then, and this is where the self-awareness piece comes into play, is like that you have to tell yourself a better story, right? Um, if with the story that I've been telling myself, that I had been telling myself, I had so much shame around it, right? Like, man, like what kind of a human being am I that I chose, this profession for money, Yeah, I mean, I think, telling yourself a true and empowering story is really important. That's part of the self-awareness, right? Like, why did I actually choose medicine? And then when I thought of the reasons, I realized that I had completely neglected like the pure joy that I felt, right, about learning about the human body. I completely neglected that as part of the reasons for why I chose this profession. I was only focusing on the reasons that came out of like this scarcity mentality, right? Of this young boy who felt fear, right? For um his family's ability to provide, for
Mm.
his family's livelihood. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with those reasons, but you also have to honor the reasons that came out of like this pure love for medicine, right? So I guess what I'm
Mm.
saying is what I have learned to do over the years is it's not all or nothing. It's not black or white. It's nuanced. I have learned to use the word and a lot, right? And yes, I chose medicine because this was a secured route for me in terms of just being able to make a living and provide for my family. And I chose medicine because I had this fascination with the human mind and the human body, right? And the miracle that is the human being. And
Mm.
I wanted to make my parents proud, right? So it's a multitude of reasons. Which reason are you going to give weight? Because that is what
Mm.
becomes your story. And if you tell yourself a more empowering story, then you can lead a more empowering life. If you tell yourself a more disempowering story, then you predispose yourself to states like burnout, you know?
Mm.
Because, like, going back to burnout real quick, it is such a multifaceted thing, right? Like, there are so many reasons why people can get burned out, and not just in medicine, just in life in general. Like, medicine
Mhm.
as a whole, the structure in which we learn medicine in this country, like residency training, right? That structure predisposes you to burnout. I mean, we all know the reasons, right? No need to get into all the details, the long hours, and
Mhm.
kind of, how you're sort of at the bottom of the totem pole, and, personality clashes, cultural differences.
Mm.
There's so much just within the realm of medical training that can predispose you to burnout. But so much of it is also the story that you have been telling yourself all of these years, right? And things going on in your personal life, So it's a nuanced and complex topic, right? It's not just one thing that predisposes you
Mm.
to it. So what I've learned about going through my own burnout journey and then kind of coming back out of it is it really matters how you talk to yourself. It really
Mhm.
matters how you talk to yourself. And that's kind of the self-awareness piece that I was talking to, that I was trying to impart upon the students.
I was thinking when you were discussing burnout, because I think it's really an interesting term. And it reminds me also of another popularized term, imposter syndrome, and how we use these a
Yep.
lot. And my concern with them is that when we put a lot of weight on, again, externalizing and calling it a syndrome, calling it this thing called burnout, my concern is sometimes maybe we are not focusing on root problems, or we're deflecting a little bit. You know what I mean? I have concerns about that
Yes.
because, you know, residency, there's some really significant problems with how we train residents, right? And there's concerns, and you really talked about some of those. And there's concerns that I have, and I know other physicians have, when we use the term burnout. Does it make it a problem of the person who's experiencing it rather than put the weight on the system that's creating the problem for the individual? You know what I mean? So I wonder if sometimes when we use terms like burnout or imposter syndrome, if we then externalize the issue and we then say, well, I have this issue of burnout, right? So it's this syndrome or this problem that I have, and now I need to be fixed. Now, I need to do a training to learn how to balance my life and my work, for example, right? Instead of actually looking to the real problem, which is the system's not working for the humans that are living in it. The system was made for the humans, right? Made for the residents to train them, but the system is burning them out, right? So they're not burned out. The system is burning people out. And I worry when we use these terms, sometimes we do it because it's shorthand. And we as physicians, and you as ophthalmologists especially, use a lot of shorthand because it makes communication quick and easy when you're dealing with not quick and easy topics. But I am interested in
Yes.
these terms like burnout and imposter syndrome because I think they maybe confuse the issue a bit, and then they make the person who's experiencing burnout feel like they're the problem instead of the system that's burning them out is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, and I think these these words, they tend to, like, put human beings into, like, these boxes, um,
Mm.
like burnout, and like I said, it's a very nuanced topic, but, like, here's the box of burnout, and we're just going to throw a bunch of stuff in here. Here's the box of imposter syndrome. We're going to throw a bunch of stuff in here. For me, I think for me, it's like, what exactly am I feeling, right? How does burnout make me feel? I don't care
Mm.
what you call it. You can call it imposter syndrome, you can call it anxiety, you can call it whatever you want. How does that make me feel? And for me, it was just like this feeling of being completely numb, right? I couldn't feel my emotions. I think burnout, the way I define it, is like it's
Mm.
just it's a complete like numbing effect. I am an ophthalmologist. I would do surgeries that would help people see better, right? It would completely change their lives. And I couldn't feel like the joy that my patients were feeling because I was so
Mm.
just checked out, right? And
Mm.
and so I think I think you have to take a step back and ask yourself, it doesn't matter how you define these things and how you label them, what am I feeling right now? Right?
Mm.
Constantly being in touch with your feelings and your emotions. And if the answer to that is, I don't feel anything, that's good. That's progress, right? At least we know that for whatever reason, whether it's the training culture or it's the personal issues that you have going on, or
Mm.
maybe it's the narrative that you've been telling yourself your entire life, for whatever reason, you've hit a point where you just feel apathy, right? Um, and that's a starting point to then figure out, well, what do we do about it? Why is it that you're so numb, right, to emotions? And how can we get you to feel again? So much of what we do
Mhm.
in medicine is being able to feel empathy for yourself and others. But I think we forget that in medicine, right? I was thinking about this the other day that, um, I had a patient in clinic. His A1C was like 16, right? And I went into doctor mode. I was
Mm.
like, 16, dude, what happened? He's like, well, my wife was in the hospital, during the pandemic. And the last two and a half, 3 years have been really hard. And I had to put her as my priority. And then I was like, okay, tell
Mm.
me more about that. And he said, well, I was living in the hospital with her. I was eating hospital food and I was eating from vending machines. And so I didn't really get to
Mm.
take care of my health because I asked him, well, what was your A1C before that? He said it was like a 6 point something. I was like, oh, wow, that's really good. You went from a 6 to a
Mm.
16 in like 2 years. Okay,
Mm.
that makes sense. You put your wife as a priority, right? First of all, that's true love right there, and second of all, like we forget, that there are real
Mm.
people sitting on the other side of that exam chair, um, it's not just numbers. But right then and there, I
Mm.
was about to go into my doctor mode of like, oh, your A1C is too high. You got to get on insulin and get it back down to, a 7 or 8, or you're gonna have, have all these issues with your vision and all this stuff. But when I actually took the time to
Mm.
hear his story, I could feel I could feel empathy for him, right? Because I've been there, when my mom was going through some really challenging times, like I had to kind of put things that were, important to me on the back burner and really focus on
Mm.
my family, my parents. And so so much of what we do in medicine is having empathy for others and ourselves. And when you are in that state of burnout, I'm telling you, like, I couldn't feel it. I could not feel empathy. Forget for the patient, I couldn't even feel it for myself, right?
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so, like, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think, like, for me,
Mhm.
that's what it comes down to. I don't really necessarily pay attention to the labels. Um,
Mhm.
I have, since going through my own journey with burnout and all these things, um, I have focused on becoming more self-aware, and for me that means being more in touch with my emotions and my feelings. I'm always
Mhm.
asking myself,
Yeah.
like, this is really bothering me, right? Why? Where am I feeling this?
Mm.
Where in my body am I actually feeling this sensation? So I, yeah, I've just gotten more in touch with that aspect of myself.
Yeah. And that's honestly, when you were speaking the last few minutes, that's what I just kept, visualizing, is bring it to your body, right? Bring it back to your body. And when you bring
Yeah,
it back to your
yeah,
body, when you're not in your body, you're just dissociated from it. And it almost feels like you were describing a dissociation from your body
absolutely.
because
Yes,
of the
yes,
stress and because of things that were going on in life. You were dissociating. And then you learned how to say, no, for this to be my life and to feel my life, I have to come back in my body, even if it's uncomfortable. And then if I want to get more comfortable, I need to make some changes.
yes. That's a really good word, dissociative, because I mean, when I think about the depths of my burnout, those days where I was just like, I mean, I was like a zombie. I'd go to work. I mean, I'm doing all the right things because like I've been just trained intellectually, right? Like I know,
Mm,
how to examine a patient and how to do the surgery and all the stuff, but I I was like, yeah, I mean, it was an out of body experience, right? Like there's
mhm,
the Dr. Shez part of me who's just going through the motions, but Shez, the human being, right? The empathetic, compassionate person that I am, he was nowhere to be found. I had lost
yeah.
touch with that part of me completely in the depths of burnout. And it just makes me so sad because there's so many people like that out there, right? Um,
Mm,
I
yeah.
call them sleepwalkers, in medicine. I mean,
Mm,
there's so many people like that out there
mhm,
that are just kind of going through the motions, but are so disconnected with their own emotions. And
yeah.
it's not a good recipe for becoming a good doctor. It really isn't, right? Yeah, the knowledge part of becoming a doctor and the intellectual component is very important, but I would almost argue that the empathy and the compassion of a doctor, that's our true like healing force,
Mm,
right?
it
It's
is.
not our
I
knowledge
feel the
base.
same.
It's our
Mhm,
ability to relate to another human being's struggles.
mm,
And
yeah.
when you're in burnout, it's nowhere to be found. At least that was the truth. That was true for me. So
Right. Well, I think, it goes back to the hierarchy of needs. And when your hierarchy of needs isn't being met, if you're burnt out, that's psychological, physical distress. You're not in your body, right? Your needs aren't being met. You can't go to those higher levels of presence. You can't be there for your patients in
yes,
the same way as you can when you are a
exactly.
fulfilled, present person. And so that's why it's so important that, as we look over our shoulder, and, you did that talk for students yourself as a gift to them. When we look back over our shoulder at the people coming up behind us going through training, what can we do to try to improve their experience? Because it not only helps them, it also helps us, because, we're going to be their patients too. And we want them to be present and whole, and to be able to gift us, their whole caring, doctoring self, and not just the robotic part that's trying to survive through each day. So, I love how you are speaking to try to encourage the self-awareness part to young physicians and young people who are training to go into their field. And I also wanted to connect this kind of out of body experience with, how did for you the space medicine and the space entrepreneurship come into play as you were going through all of these other parts of your career and just dealing with life and challenges?
Yeah. Well, so two things. So there's the space angle, and then there's the medicine and the business angle. The space
Mm,
angle was something that I've just always really been fascinated with space, right? From a very, very early age. Like I mentioned, I would read books about Einstein as like a hobby, which is very, very nerdy. But that was my thing back in the day, you know? And I don't know, there's just something about like when I was going through some really tough times during my teenage years, I would just step outside, I would just go outside the house, I would look at the night sky and I would see all the stars just decked out, right? And I remember learning that some of the stars that we are seeing, they don't even exist anymore because it has taken light that
Mm,
long to get to us, right? Because they're light years away. Think about that, right? I'm seeing it. It is objectively my truth and my reality. It's there, but it's also not there anymore because it's already gone through its evolution, and the star has already moved on, right? I don't know,
right,
for some
right.
reason that perspective always helped me to kind of minimize my own struggles, right? It just
Mm,
would teach me how insignificant I really am compared to everything else out
mm,
there, right? Compared to the cosmos. So I think you have to have that kind of a perspective to go through some really tough times in life. And for me, that was space, right? For others, it's other mechanisms. Whatever it is for you, there has to be that level of a perspective shift that you have to make in your mind. So for me, that was my fascination with space. It was a very deep thing for me. It was kind of philosophical, and I always carried it with me. And then in medical school, I discovered space medicine as a field to specialize in, right? And I was like, whoa, what is this? Like I've always been fascinated by space, and now, here's this cool way to kind of merge all of my passions. And
mm,
basically all that is astronauts have a lot of issues when they go to space because your entire physiology changes, you lose gravity, and one of the major issues are vision issues. So there's a syndrome called spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome, or SANS for short. And so I did a lot of the initial research on that. I interned with NASA for a couple of months. Um, and my focus was SANS. I got to live with an astronaut during that time. Just really, really cool part of my training, right? And then towards the end of my residency training, I discovered uh, a first of its kind MBA program in the space economy, right? That was
mm,
launching. And I was like, oh my God, like, because I have, some business background from back when I was a teenager. I was like, oh, like I gotta do this. This is like a calling, you know? And I'm
mm.
gonna be the first to participate. Heck yeah, I want to do this. So I took part in that. And that was just an amazing, amazing year. That was 2022. If you follow my timeline, that's kind of when I was going through the burnout, right? So
Mm,
if I'm going to be really honest with myself, it was probably me searching for that thing that is going to bring me fulfillment and joy that I had lost,
mm,
right? In my burnout, right? And so this was just me like reaching out for help and just searching for ways to fix myself. The only way
as
that I've
far as humanly
I've ever
possible
known,
in space.
I I guess so. I guess so.
Yeah.
And the only way that I have really been, um like I'm someone who just like knowledge is sort of like my crutch, right? Curiosity is my
Mm,
superpower, knowledge is my crutch. What do I mean by that? Well, like when I don't know something, I try to figure it out. So I'm not
mm,
happy. Let's go get another degree. Right?
mm,
Because that's what I've done my whole life. So maybe another degree is a
mm,
solution, maybe in a completely different direction, right? Um, that was not the solution. That was a distraction, right? I'm so glad I did it because I made a ton of connections and I learned so much, right? Curiosity has always been my thing. I'm always curious to learn about everything. But if that move was made to um, address burnout, then that wasn't the right solution, right?
Mm,
Addressing the burnout was, not getting any degrees, anything like that. It was like, I mean, I took a step back and actually worked less. I worked, like I said, 1 or 2 days in medicine, and I went on retreats, and I really
mm,
focused inward, right? Inside my mind to figure out why I was so unhappy. Instead of like kind of distracting myself by all these different shiny objects. So
mm,
so that's why I said there's two angles there. The space angle, it's more of a philosophical thing. It's always been super close to my heart. Um, and that perspective that I described earlier of like how insignificant I really am compared to everything else out there, that's really what helped me pick myself up out of this situation of burnout, right?
mm,
So it's almost like I rediscovered that perspective that I was so fascinated by when I was when I was in my teenage years, Um,
mm, mm,
and as far as the space medicine and entrepreneurship, I think I have no doubt in my mind that I will end up using that knowledge and those skills that I've learned doing those things. Um, I don't know exactly how it's all going to come together for me, and that's okay, right? Because I'm 33 years old. I have my entire life ahead of me to figure that out. But if
yeah.
I had not taken a step back and understood the root cause of my burnout and just kind of developed this self-awareness that I now I have no doubt that I would have continued to chase various things and
Mm.
and just continue to be chronically unhappy.
I love this example of how you literally had to push yourself to the as far as you could reach, to the bounds of where humans can go, to space, right? To feel
Yeah,
that no, I actually need to come home and look within myself, and that's where the answers are. And it took that reach to get back there. And how now, looking back, I mean, it was worth it because it brought you home. And what else could be more
100%.
valuable than really
100%.
coming home to yourself?
A
It's
lot
beautiful.
of the burnout and the imposter syndrome, a lot of these labels, there's a common theme there of not belonging, right? Felt like I never
Yeah.
belonged. And I think that's what we're all searching for. We're searching for this like sense of belonging, this sense of connectedness, right? And for me, it was like, at least I belong as a like as stardust, right? Like
Mm,
at least I
mm-hmm,
belong in this universe, if nowhere else. That's what space was
mm,
for me, you know? And you're right. I had to actually go to those extremes of thinking in my mind to realize that actually, like, it's all in here, right? If I can figure out a
mm,
way to convince myself that I belong from a mindset shift perspective, then
mm-hmm.
everything else becomes easy. Everything else just becomes really easy.
It does. That is so impactful and resonates so much. And when we are looking to belong, we start that journey often. We conflate belonging and fitting in, and we're always trying to fit. And like, does this shoe fit? Does that shoe fit? And none of them don't because they weren't made for us. But then we finally, hopefully, if we come to that point in our lives, we look inward and we realize that for us to fit in or to belong somewhere else, we have to belong to ourselves. We have to know who we are, accept who we are, love who we are, invest in who we are, not invest in all of these roles that may or may not lead us down the path. We have to actually search for our path, search for ourselves, and then we can go out and resonate with others. Because why, if we're wearing these masks and these facades and filling these roles that aren't ours, how could anyone recognize us? And how could we find where we belong if we're really kind of masquerading throughout life? So I love that
Yes.
you had to just strip yourself of all worldly connections and go to space in your mind. And then you realize, no, like I need to come back to myself. That's so powerful. Now that you've really become self aware and you have created kind of that new scaffolding within yourself as you're going through life's challenges, you're no longer seeking external validation. You're really focusing on what you want and how you want to build your life. What does the future hold?
Yeah, good question. So first, I'll just say, I don't think that you ever just become self-aware, right? I
Mm,
think self-awareness is it's kind of a lifelong pursuit of understanding yourself. I don't think it's a destination, it's a journey, not to sound too
mm,
cliche, but just like most things, right? Now that you know, or now that I know that that's that is sort of my saving um grace, I guess, if you will, right? Like
mm,
whenever I am um shaken up and I'm just like kind of really, in my head, I know that I have to figure out the why behind it, right? Why am I
mm,
feeling this way? That's the self-awareness piece. It's just a muscle that you keep building. You keep asking yourself why, right? Um
mm,
So that's one thing on the self-awareness piece. It's something that every single day I'm working on, right? Every single day. Um, and so two, what does the future hold? Well, I think I think one thing that I've realized in this journey so far is that um, it really comes down to serving in a way that's beyond yourself, right?
mm,
Serving in a way that's beyond yourself. Like that is what fulfillment is. That is what happiness is. I don't think it comes from you serving yourself. I think it comes from you serving others. So how do you do that? Well, I'm so lucky in that I get to do that as an ophthalmologist day in and day out, right?
mm.
I work
Yeah.
about 4 days a week, and I get to do cataract surgeries, I get to do LASIK, and I get to change people's lives every single day, right? So I'm probably one of the luckiest people in the world that I actually get to do that in my professional career, you know, and get paid
Mm,
for it. I mean, you really can't ask for something more, you know what I mean? Like we're really lucky as
yeah.
doctors if you really think about it. Um, so that's in the professional side. In my personal life, with kind of this journey of burnout and the self-awareness piece and all these things that I've learned about myself, I know that I am not the only one who has gone through this uh, crazy journey, right, of burnout.
Mm,
I know that there are people right now, whether in college or in medical school or residency, who are on this trajectory of burning out, right?
mm,
They're on this path of becoming doctors because of external validation type of reasons, and people that just haven't developed that self-awareness yet. And so basically, who I was 5 or 10 years ago, those are the people that I want to help, right? To
mm,
really um understand the why behind why they're chasing whatever it is that you're chasing, right? um
yeah.
and so for me, like if I can do that in my sort of personal sphere, then that's going to be a way for me to contribute in a way that's bigger than just me, that's beyond just me. And so to that extent, I have a coaching platform that I am working on. It's called Visionary Doc. It started as kind of a podcast type of situation back in 2018 when I didn't even know like any of this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? I just knew that I liked talking to people about these things, you know. but I didn't really know like why, and I hadn't really gone through my own burnout and all these things. But over the last several years, the vision is becoming more and more like just crystal clear, right? That um, it really does come down to being aware of your emotions, understanding them, um, and not letting them control you, right? It comes down to you controlling your emotions. And so
Mm.
I want to build a coaching platform off of that concept and really just help guide others who are suffering, just like I was a few years ago. So
Mm.
those are the two kind of main focuses of my life. It's ophthalmology and just continuing to do what I'm doing there, continuing to build my skill as an ophthalmologist, and serving others in that capacity, and then continuing to build this self-awareness for myself, right? So that I can take this knowledge and guide others as well.
Well, I love that. And I'm sure you're having a great impact on many people, both through what you're doing through surgeries and seeing patients in your clinic, as well as the work you're doing outside with Visionary Doc. And that's so exciting. Where can people go to learn more about you and your mission if they want to find you on the web or on socials? Where can they find you?
Instagram is visionary.doc. And my LinkedIn is just, my name, Shehzad Batliwala. I have a very unique name. So if you just Google my name or Dr. Shez, it'll pop up. And then my website is visionarydoc.com, which is still being revamped and all that stuff. It's a slow moving process, as you know, since you kind of do something very similar. And that's the other thing I want to say, right? You know, I, I still have these ambitions, of doing all of these things, but they're not like pathological anymore. You know, I
Mm,
I had ambitions that I call pathological. Like I was a very pathologically ambitious person back in the day.
mm,
And now on the other side of understanding these things about me, I'm still ambitious, but like I know that it doesn't all have to happen overnight or in a week or a
mm,
month, right? I have a monumental goal, but as long as there's a plan to break that giant goal down into chunks and I can just be consistent about it, um, then I'll get there, right? I don't have this like sense of
yeah.
urgency or anxiety that like it all has to get done or it's a threat to my survival. And that's how I used to live my life.
Mm,
Like if my ambitions
mm,
didn't come to fruition, it's a threat to my survival.
yeah.
And it's a great recipe to
Mm.
just go neurotic about it. So I don't do
Yes,
that anymore.
stressful. Yeah,
Yeah.
so stressful. And I want to say, I think, especially from the position that you're in now, having gone through medical school, gone through residency and fellowship, and now being an attending physician and in a position where you can educate people, you know, we don't really need another person in the world acting like they've got it all together and they can do a million things perfectly without any problems. Because that's not true,
Exactly.
right? It's not true. We don't
That's not
need
true.
that. What we need are people like you who are willing to be vulnerable and share what it felt like to go through what I call that messy middle where things were kind of uncertain and you were figuring things out and it was painful and challenging, and you're sharing that says to the person, I'm a human, you're a human, we're going to get through this together. And by sharing our stories, we can get there potentially faster, we can be stronger together, and we can have vision and work towards the vision. It's not going to materialize. We're not going to snap our fingers. It's not a miracle. It's hard work, but because we know it's our vision, we know it's our passion, we'll do this work and we'll support one another. And so I love that message that you're sending to people. And I'm so excited to watch your career unfold. And I just appreciate you sharing that message with my Talks with Dr. Schaefer listener.
I appreciate your the conversation and your questions. I think what you're doing is amazing. And yeah, to your last point, like we forget that we're human beings first. We're human beings first. And if we could just like understand that and give each other the grace to like be human, right? Which means that sometimes people are not, you know, they're gonna fail. They're gonna disappoint you, or they're not gonna show
Mhm.
up as what you expect. That's okay, because put yourself in their shoes. You've been there too, right? You've shown you haven't shown up in the best way that you wanted to, and sometimes as well. So I think just giving each other grace as human beings first and foremost, before the doctor stuff and before the business, before
Mm.
everything else.
I so appreciate having shared this time with you, and I'm so glad to have made this connection. And thank you again to our listeners for being here for this really, really important discussion. Follow along here at Talks with Dr. Schaefer for more inspiring episodes. Take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.